I heard recently about a fellow that went to church by himself. His wife was not feeling well that day, so she stayed home. So when he got back, predictably, she asked, "Well, how was the message?" And he says, "It was okay, except for three things." She said, "Well, what was that?" He said, "First of all, it was read. Second, it was read poorly. And third, it wasn't worth reading." Well, I guess we all as preachers can relate to that. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about next Sunday's message. More importantly, I want to focus on this thought. Whatever you preach next Sunday, in reality, you are the message. This is especially true for pastors that are there week after week. Trust me, and you know this, but trust me, they're watching you as much, if not more, than listening to you. And so I think the Bible backs me up on this whole concept of you are the message. Whatever you preach, you are the message. For instance, Philippians 4:9, kind of my pivotal text for this, something that I have put to memory in my own heart. But the things you have learned and received and heard and saw in me. That's what Paul said, writing to the Philippians. He says, these are the things I want you to do. The things you have heard, you can hear things, but you got to receive it. And you can learn them, but you've got to receive them. But the barrier to doing that a lot of times, or either the gate to doing that a lot of times, is our life. The things you saw in me do. Writing to the Thessalonians, he says, for you yourselves know you ought to follow us. For we were not disorderly among you, nor did we eat anyone's bread free of charge, but worked with labor and toil night and day, that we might not be a burden to any of you. Not because we do not have authority, but to make ourselves an example of how you should follow us. Paul is saying, we're the message. Whatever we say, do what we do. Writing to the Philippians a little later, he says, brethren, join in following my example. And not only my example, but note those who walk as you have us for a pattern. Watch, not only are you the message, do as I do, but he's telling them, look at others and see if they're doing what I do. And if they're not, beware. That's pretty strong. Because sometimes we're taught, to keep yourself, may I hide behind the cross that no one sees me and sees only Christ. I understand the spirit of that. But in reality, they're going to see Christ. They're going to hear his voice. They're going to learn what to do by watching you. And so writing even to a young man, Paul writing to Timothy, he says, let no one despise your youth. You younger guys, you say, well, what do I know? These saints, they've forgotten more than I've learned and or more than I know. That's okay. He's writing to Timothy. He says, let no one despise your youth. Be an example to the believers in word, in conduct, in love, in spirit, in faith, in purity. In other words, brothers and sisters, you and I are the message. You probably know by now, or at least some of you know this, that one of my favorite preachers from the 1800s is Phillips Brooks. And Brooks writes this. He says, I have dwelt in his lectures at the Yale Seminary, back when Yale was a real seminary. But he says, I have dealt long upon the preacher and his character because he is essential to the sermon. He cannot throw a sermon forth into the world as an author can his book or an artist can his statue and let it live thenceforth a life wholly independent of himself. In other words, what he's saying is you can pick up a good book and you don't know anything about the author, but you enjoy the book. Or you can look at a statue or a painting, a piece of art, and you don't know anything about the artist necessarily, but it stands on its own. But what he's saying here is that a sermon never stands on its own. It's kind of like reading sermons, and I enjoy reading sermons, but you miss something when you read a sermon. You know what you miss? You miss the preacher. the animation, the spirit, the soul of that preacher. Wouldn't you love, I've thought about it a lot of times. I'd love to have heard Charles Spurgeon preach. Can you imagine? One of my favorite preachers is a fellow by the name of R.A. Torrey. And I have literally read his sermons and wept. I can't imagine how it would feel if I could have been there and heard him and seen him and watched him live his life. Bottom line, you and I are the message. Therefore, what should I preach next Sunday? Preach from the overflow of your life. Take your people, invite them to join you on the journey God has started you on. For David to be the king, he had to first be a shepherd. And God was teaching him how to be a king. And that's why you are a shepherd. He's teaching you so that you can lead others. And so just lead them as a shepherd leads his sheep, as a king leads his kingdom, as a leader leads his people. And so just invite them to follow. Let me just give you a couple practical applications. First of all, study the Bible for you. Don't study the Bible to find sermons. The sermons will come from the overflow of your life. As you get better, your sermons will get better. And as your sermons get better, your people will get better. It's like looking through a window that's just got, back in the day, my dad is from North Fork, West Virginia, which was a coal mining town. And I remember the first time going, my first memory, I went as a little boy, but you'd look through the window and the coal dust would be on the windows and they were dirty. But if you'd go out and first of all, if you just kind of blow, the coal dust would come off, you could begin to see through the window better. And if you cleaned it, you could see through the window even better. And so as you get better, the light will shine through more. And here's the comforting news. No matter how much in your own life you're trying to deal with, and we all are, you're not going to get perfect until you get to heaven. As I heard someone say, there's only two perfect people that's ever existed, the Lord Jesus and your mother-in-law. But none of us are going to be perfect. But as the window keeps getting clearer, as our life keeps getting purer, the light will get stronger. And really, it's preaching through your weakness sometimes that gives you even more impact. They realize, hey, this is not something that he just got out of a book or some scholarly ivy tower or something or another. But our weakness, our failures, our struggles add value, helps the message become more real. It grounds it in the real world as they're watching us. And so study the Bible for you and preach from the overflow of your study. Here's another practical application. Study life for you. Experience life broadly. Live life. Look for God in everyday life. Paul said, writing to the Romans in Romans chapter 1, he says, people that don't know, have never heard the gospel. God has given enough evidence in nature that they're without excuse. And so as you live life broadly, it's been said that travel is the antidote to prejudice. And it is so true. It's easy to be prejudiced about people until you go and see where they live. You walk in their shoes. Experiencing life broadly makes you a better person, makes your messages. You come to the pulpit with life experience. Can you imagine preaching on missions because you read it in Acts 1 and 8, you shall be witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and othermost parts of the world. And brothers and sisters, we need to do this because Jesus said it. Well, that's true. But can you imagine if you've never done this, but imagine it, but if you've done it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've just got back from a missions trip. You've just gone downtown, maybe St. Louis or Chicago, and you've worked in a soup kitchen. You've gotten involved and just dirt under your fingernail kind of ministry. And you come back, you've held a baby in your arms. You've held a needful person in your arms. You've come back from a funeral, a tragic funeral, and you share. You're broken. You've experienced life. You've gone on a hike. You've gone out in nature and you've seen the glory of God. All of those things reading the Bible, studying to make you better, studying life, experiencing life to make you better. All that broadens your life. And then, so never feel guilty about enjoying your life. Your best sermon illustrations are going to come from your own life. And then two more. Study the Bible for yourself. Study life for yourself. Live life to its fullest. Broaden your experiences. But then wait until it moves you before preaching on a subject. Okay? It's like the fellow said, you don't want a skinny chef. You don't want to go and pay good money and you look and the chef comes out and they're skinny. You want a fat chef. You want it obvious that they've enjoyed their own cooking. Well, I'm not saying we need fat preachers, but we need to be fat. It needs to have moved us. Okay? If it hasn't moved you yet, you're not ready to preach it. But when you come to that pulpit, and brothers and sisters, I've wrestled with this issue all week long. And it may be all month, it may be all year, it may be something that continually moves you. And when you can weep over it, when you can laugh and rejoice about it, then you're ready. You're ready to preach. Put your apron on and eat your own cooking. And when it moves you, when it's finger licking good, then you're ready. Because I assure you, if your message hasn't moved you, it's not going to move your people. But then last, don't preach it until you're clear on why it moves you. The first, don't preach it until it moves you, will save you from dry, dead orthodoxy. You can preach the truth, and it can be so boring, it kills people. But then you want to know why it moves you. That will save you from cotton candy emotionalism that has no real calories and doesn't give people the strength to make it through the tough times. So do your homework. Peter, writing to the diaspora, to the people scattered abroad, he says, when people see your life, be ready to give an answer. That's where we get our word apologetic. To give an apology, or apologia, I think is how they said it. But anyway, to give a defense, to explain why you're passionate, why you're moved, why you're doing the things that you do. And so do your homework, think deep. And when you're convinced emotionally and intellectually, man, you've got a powerful message. You've lived it. You're there. And you're not opening the door and inviting them to go in. You're in the room. Say, come on in. And they're watching how you live as well as listening to how you talk. And so, to sum it up, the truth that is not modeled or illustrated is mostly truth not observed. And do you ever worry just week after week, people come and you preach, but you see very little change? Well, maybe it's because you haven't been changed. Invite people to join you on a journey, your journey. You are the example. I should have showed you the book. I got it right over there in my bookshelf. Earlier, just this week, I finished a book that was way over my head. It was a book by Richard Swinburne. I wrote the title down, Are We Bodies or Souls? And it intrigued me. And so I read it. He's a Christian philosopher, but I've never had any training in academic philosophy. And it was way over my head. He used all of this scientific and philosophical arguments and explanations and mathematical formulas. And honestly, I really struggle with it. But every once in a while, he would throw in a real life example. Oh, yeah, okay, now that I can understand. And I don't know, I guess he was writing to philosophers or academia. He sure wasn't writing to lay people like me that knows nothing about philosophy at an academic level. And so I didn't get a lot out of the book. It was I'm sure, a great book, because he's a highly respected Christian philosopher. I'm sure it was a great book, but I didn't get much at all out of it. The little bit I got was when he grounded it in real life. And that's our job, is to ground this great truth that you and I are called to deliver, this great message, to ground it in everyday life. And there's no better grounding than our own lives. So you and I, at the end of the day, we're the message. God bless you guys and gals. Go out there, live well, speak well, and honor God well, and he'll take care of the rest. Love you. I pray that you have a great weekend. Let's keep running to win until Jesus returns. God bless.